Hello and welcome to part 2 of the weekly lecture. I didn't want to do this. You heard me rambling about it at the end of the last part. But I'm sitting here now thinking this is actually a great idea. Because this week is kind of weird in that the primary thing is certainly PDO, but I'm also introducing a couple kind of just out there on their own functions. So we're going to focus more on those here. With that being said, I'm also going to do probably more PDO in this video than anything else. So what am I talking about? I don't know. So one thing I want to show you is a mail function. Easy to use if you want it to be easy. You just just who it's to, subject, body of the message. Advanced options do matter, but I'm not going to get into those. One of the reasons why is I don't understand them well. But as you can imagine, there are all kinds of options for email. And one thing I want you to know, a couple of things I want you to know. One is that this isn't going to work locally in XAMPP because XAMPP is not set up to use your email address. I have actually set XAMPP up to send emails before, but I mean, you could. If you do a little Googling on it, you'll find it. There's some files you have to modify, but I don't know that it's worth it. I'm just telling you that if you put this on a live web server, it will work. Live web servers are connected to they're all connected up. Everything's configured. So this is one of those things you're going to only be able to test it or make sure that you test it when you put it live. And the other thing, and also disregard those warnings that you're going to get locally because I think you're going to get them. The other thing is that these emails, these are automatically generated. These are, I mean, I don't know what spam really is, but I think this is kind of spam. It's automatically generated emails. So most email filters are there's a good chance these are going to get picked off. So if you're getting errors on your server, then you know you have problems. But if you're just not receiving emails, I've seen a lot of students through the years who just can't manage to not get these things picked off by spam filters. So it's kind of hard to test, but it's also an easy function. I mean, I don't know what would go wrong with it particularly, but it might seem like it's not going right. The other things I want to talk about, and so I have made some modifications to this from the last video and this one. So password verify is the function I always refer to this process is, but there's also password hash. So these are two functions built into PHP, and these handle the salting and hashing of your passwords. So password hash is what you use to salt, hash, and store it. Password verify is what you use to retrieve it and compare it. So these two functions handle all your salting and hashing. I always feel bad that I didn't go straight to those, or I don't know, I kind of do, because I have had students ask about those in the past. I like that we manually salt, manually hash our passwords in Introduction to PHP. It helps you to understand what password security issues look like and what the solutions are made up of. These things exist, and these are a good idea to use. And so the reason I'm introducing it this week is not that I'm trying to throw an extra thing at you. It's more that I'm trying to have you focus on PDO, and this simplifies that hashing and salting of your password. And I'm just trying to make your life simple. And this is also a reasonable solution. So I'm introducing these things. It might seem like they're kind of scary, but they're not that scary. I'm trying to make you use them just to make your life easier. And the last thing is a privacy statement. You're going to do the lab. I will just kind of defer to the lab for that. This is kind of painful, right, to create a privacy policy, but it's the kind of thing where if you put some thought into it one time, it's going to apply to everything on your site. And it's the kind of thing that you could use from one site to another. I mean, the information you're collecting and how things work is going to be a little bit different, but a privacy statement is an essential part of a real website that collects information. And when we're using PHP, that is exactly what we're doing, is collecting people's information. So it's something that we oftentimes overlook, but it's something that should exist. I think it's a good use of your time to create one of these. And I also very much encourage you to go find some templates out there because they certainly do exist. Anyways, like I said, you're going to do the lab. All right, 5 minutes of rambling. I don't even know how much I rambled about this same stuff at the end of the last video. So let's get into some examples. So I'm going to just take all this stuff and apply it right here. So I've got this register page. Here's my connect script. Here's my create table. Here's where I get all my stuff. It's a register page. So it looks like, I was messing with it. So it looks like this. Right, so first thing you're going to do is check for a password match. Now, the first thing I want to make clear here is that I am not trying to do a good job with this at all. I'm being a total hack. This is going to be up above the head of your page, generally speaking. You know you don't want to do echoes up in the head. It doesn't make sense. It's going to be outside of the container tags. But I'm trying to make this as short as I can. I know you know how to make those error messages more readable by making a string and echoing them in the body. I'm not doing that today. I'm trying to make this as short as I can. I already feel bad about how long our videos have been. So I'm going to say if pass1 is not equal to pass2, well then, oops, not that, but I'm just going to echo something. Echo PW don't match. Not a good error message, whatever. I'm going to use an else here, which you know I never do that. And then I'm going to take all this business where we actually salt, hash, and store the password, send the email, all that other registration stuff. I'm going to put that in the else. Those of you that have seen me write code before, you know I don't do that. I generally don't. I usually use like a flag, but I guess if I'm trying to do this in the minimum lines, this will do. So if passwords match, we're going in here. So salt and hash that password. So I've taught you how to do this. I've seen you do it. Everyone at least somewhat understands how this goes. But in my experience, I have to reteach that again in this second course. And given that we kind of lost a week here, that's one of the things I'm trying to not do. Because I'd literally be referring you to the same stuff I did before. I'm telling you, that stuff does exist. If you want to learn more about it, check my YouTube channel. Put in like salt, hash, password, stuff like that. Security. I don't know what exactly what the videos are called, but you could rewatch it. But instead, I'm just going to use those functions that I was telling you about. So if I want to salt and hash, I can just go, hey, I'm going to create a variable called pass, and I'm going to call this function called password hash. Password hash takes 2 arguments. The first one is the name of the password that you want to hash. That's hash and salt, but right, I don't really need to say that. That's that thing I got from the form. And the other thing is the name of the hashing algorithm. So you can specify a hashing algorithm like argon2i or something, or you can say password underscore default. This is going to change over time. This is going to be whatever your current version of PHP thinks is a reasonable choice. That right there. So that handles my salting and my hashing. Let me show you what that looks like. I don't know that it's interesting. Well, I guess it's interesting, but I don't know if it's interesting. I don't know what this form is working off of. There it is. I have no idea what my password was, but it's just this weird string. So this weird string, in it has the hashed password, it has the salt, and it has the hashing algorithm. It's all built into that string. And you're like, well, where does one start? Where does one end? Who cares? What I can tell you is that when you use the password verify function, this function knows how to look at that string and say, oh, there's the salt, there's the hash, there's the hashing algorithm. Let's do that comparison. It's pretty cool. But as I've mentioned a few times, it completely obscures the process, right? It doesn't do anything to further your understanding of it. So I don't love it, but I don't know. It's pretty good. All right. So I don't actually want to echo that. That's my salt and hash. Now I need to do all the SQL. So I'm going to write my SQL string. This one's kind of bad because it's long. So it's going to be insert into name of my table is that thing. Parentheses, values, parentheses. So I'm inserting name, uname, email, and pass, I think is what they're called. Yep. Email has a unique constraint on it, so we're gonna run into some issues there. And the values, since we're doing prepared statements, it's gonna be question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. I like that. But the problem is we're gonna have to bind 4 things. So if you got 4 placeholders in your string, then that means we're gonna do 4 binds, and I don't love that, but we'll deal with it. Result equals PDO. Prepare, and we're preparing that sequel. And so I know I've said a bunch of times I'm going to do the bind param, bind param, bind param, bind param, 1, 2, 3, 4, because there's 4 parameters here, but I'm not going to do that. Since there's 4 of them, I'm going to show you the quick way. So the quick way was, so there's the bind param function and there's the execute function. The shortcut is like you go straight to the execute function, and you pass that execute function an array, and that array is all the variables. It's hard to read. I don't really love that I'm doing this, but yeah, this is what the other way looks like. As I said, I do use this when I'm writing my own code because I don't know, it's a good enough time saver that I do value it. It's just hard to look at. And the thing that we want to store is that hashed password. One thing that I want to point out is what I did when I created this table is my password is 255 long. I'm going to switch that to char or binary. I think that's a smart move. So that should do that. Yeah, let's see how that works. Because, you know, I'm not sure it'll work. All right, so I knew that it would blow up for that reason. The problem is, so integrity constraint violation. So when you do a refresh, like by definition, you're gonna be stuffing the same email in there twice. So I kind of really can't test this thing at all until I handle this. So this whole thing here needs to be wrapped in a try catch, because there's gonna be an exception that happens here when there's a duplicate email, and then pressing refresh is going to generate that every time. So PDO exception. If you've been watching all my resources, you now understand that this thing that seems pretty mysterious is the same thing I write every time. I mean, I usually do like a get message here. I'm telling you I know the message. Oh, fine, I'll do it. The message that you're going to see. And so notice, so try catch block is going to stop our application from blowing up, and it's going to do this. This is where I define the behavior of an exception. And it's going to do, I don't know what it does. I'm sure A is already taken. What is it doing? I have no idea. Oh, yeah, of course, right? I always do that. I forget to echo it. Presumably, it's saying integrity. So, right, I think we can agree that that is better than just crashing everything. It's not exactly what we need. I think what we need is something a little better. So I created this flag here called error, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with it, because I think it's probably the best way we can handle this situation logically and quickly. So this represents like the idea. So I'm just going to turn it on if we generate a specific exception. So rather than this echo here, which I don't want, I'm going to say if get code is equal to 23,000. What the heck's 23,000? 23,000 is that code. That's when you violate a unique constraint. If that happens, then all I'm going to do is flip that flag to false. And you'll see what so I'm just keeping track of it with a true. So I think this works okay. Trying to think, my try catch goes down to here. Then down here, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I know I said I was going to be bad with my output. This is bad because it's still up in the head, but it's pretty close. So if error is equal to true, then I'm going to bark at them. I'll say echo bad email, pick a new one. Now that is not a good message. You should say that email is already in use, something like that. You know what these things say. They say things like, are you sure you don't have an account? But I'm not trying to do a good job with that. I'm just doing that. And then down in here, I'll say good email. Or no, I'll say thanks for registering. All right, so I'm thinking this. I put some thought into this. I did a couple drafts at it. I think this is the easiest way I can do this. And so now, rather than this kind of cryptic message, I now get something a little more helpful like that. Let's get this right. Hopefully that hasn't been used. Thanks for registering. Great. I press refresh, and you know I'm going to violate that constraint. I think we're looking good. Right, like I think we're looking good. I don't know what my table actually looks like, but I assume it looks okay. Now the other part of this is that email part. So the reason I wanted to do this if block down here, because yes, cool, I do need to communicate to the user that things went well. I should also send that user an email, and that's just mail function. First thing is who you want to send it to. That's email. Second thing is body. Thanks. And the third part is the message. And for that message, I think I want to put a reference to a piece of information that they gave me, like name or something. Fine, name's better. Now, I have a feeling that if you are pretty, I'm not sure exactly what spam filters pick up on. It's probably the lack of the fourth stuff that I think probably throws spam filters off. I'm just saying spam filters might pick up on bad titles and short bodies too. I don't know. I'm not sure like what exactly freaks out spam filters, but something about doing a really garbage email like this does freak them out. What's interesting is my spam filters don't pick them up. And it's probably because I've done this a million times and they learn. But I don't know. I'm just trying to help you kind of understand what you might deal with. Notice no email. Let's make up a weird email. Warning, mail failed to connect to localhost. Well, I think that is because my mail is not configured. I don't think that's a real problem. And I'm not saying that you should do it. It's kind of a lot of hoops to jump through just for something that I don't think you need to test the heck out of. I mean, you're going to need to put this live anyways, and you should always test everything when you put it on the web server, and I don't know why this wouldn't work. It's not a super complicated function, and right, maybe it has something, maybe the spam filter is the thing you want to test, but I think that's hard to test as well. All right, so there's your email function, mail, but email. Bunch of PDO, that shorthand binding, some try-catch blocks, exception handling, password hash. The last part of this puzzle is, it's one thing to make a register page. Let's make sure it works for the login page. So here's my login page. I'm going to borrow heavily off of what I've already done. I know normally I kind of try and do this stuff off camera, but all right, so some of this is just garbage. Like, we don't need to check the passwords. Really what we need to do here is first thing you got to do is we got to pull that salted and hashed password from that table. So that's going to be some SQL. Going to go a little like this. Select star from name of the table where uname equals prepared statement, so placeholder. And then we'll say result equals PDO prepare the SQL. Yeah, we've only got one parameter to bind, so I'll do it the other way. At this point, you're probably like, oh gosh, why are you doing that? I don't know. I just am. The other thing that I'm sitting here looking at right now, and I'm telling you is definitely a problem. We'll just discuss it. I'm not going to deal with it. I don't want to write any more code than I have to. But you see how this thing works off a username and password? On that registration page that there was nothing stopping me from having like 50 people with the same username. That's not going to go well, my friend. This is definitely not going to go well. This should be built on email, or I should have put unique constraints on the username. Right? You know what I mean? So if you got multiple people with the same username and different passwords, well, that's just a disaster. You shouldn't let that happen, but that could happen here because of what we're doing. So we'll stitch in that uname. I need to execute that thing. And that should give me back a row or not, right? Like it depends on whether there's a person with that name or not. So how we'll handle this is I'm going to do it the most efficient way I know how to do it. It's not the most intuitive, but I do need to call that password verify function. And that password verify function's Boolean, so it returns true if things work, otherwise it doesn't. Right, so this is actually, all right, if, we'll just call it if. I wanted to call it something more descriptive. So we actually have everything we need. It's just kind of weird. I think it's kind of weird. So we'll call this password verify function. So what we're going to pass it is the thing that we want to hash and compare with the thing that we stored, which is pass1. And the other thing that we want to pass it is the whatever column we got from that query based on their username. What does that mean? Well, so I got to add a step here. So we had this query here, which we executed on line 23. We need to actually fetch those results and then look into the results and compare the piece of the results that we care about, which is that salted and hashed field in that table, with this thing. And this algorithm knows to take that, remember that weird field that we're storing? It's going to be able to pick out the salt and the algorithm, and it's going to be able to handle that comparison. But before we do that, what I have to do is I'll say pass equals result fetch. So we executed it here. We pull a result. That result might be empty, and if it's empty, then this thing's just going to return false. So that's going to be a pass. And that right there represents a row from a table. The row that I want is called pass. I know, this is where things get weird. Okay, so at this point, that was not a good idea to call that pass. I should call that user, because that corresponds to a user. Right, so I queried the table based on username, and I either got nothing or I got one row. But remember, I was saying that we didn't actually check to make sure that there's not 50 users with the name Ken. There probably is, actually, which is a disaster of its own. So that's going to be a welcome, and that is going to be a try again. All right, so I have to thoughtfully kind of get to this point, actually. One, I haven't tested it yet, so I don't know how that goes. Oh, the email thing. All right, so let's do a username ZZ. I hope ZZ's good. All ZZs. There we go. Come on. Okay, I think that worked. Let's try logging in. 12 DBC. That's PDO. Oh, let's try some craziness. What did that did nothing. Because that's called uname, not name. So craziness. Hopefully this says like try again. And it does. At ZZ says welcome. So as I said initially, password verify and password hash make your life easier, and they're actually going to be relatively secure. I mean, they will change based on, as the changing times. Whereas, when we pick an arbitrary hashing algorithm, it's almost certainly outdated. But that's basically how password hash and password verify work. They're not too tough. I guess let me try and talk through this one more time, because this was kind of disjointed when I went through it. So we wrote a SQL, right? We did a prepared statement here, which just querying that login table, seeing if a username with the username that someone entered on the form exists. Here's where we fetch the results. In theory, it should either be one row or 0 rows, depending on whether that user exists. this right here compares. So this function here salts and hashes that password according to whatever the heck that is. And if there's no user with that name, then this is just nothing. And you're comparing a salted and hashed password that they entered with nothing, and that's not going to evaluate to true. So that's how that works. Over here, I don't know. I think this went relatively smoothly. As you saw, like I said, PDO's tougher to work with because you got to do try-catch blocks and deal with those exceptions. Sometimes, depending on the exception. I mean, sometimes they're not something that you are gonna do anything about. But in a unique constraint violation, that's a good example of when you would deal with it. And that email function, there was no real tricks to that. So that is how those functions work. That one's pretty straightforward. These ones are not hard to use, but it's kind of hard to get a feel for what they're doing. If you don't really if you couldn't say explain in your own words what those do, I think it's okay, just so long as you can use them. But I think there's a good chance that you might be able to understand exactly what they do. And privacy statement, that's part of the lab. So this week's weird because there's 3 separate parts to it, but and they all fit together on the assignment. So hopefully that goes well for you. Thanks for watching.